the essence of the already formed U.S.-Chinese collision, which is neither a trade war nor economic warfare. And this perspective is too shallow. It is not even the Thucydides trap that has been discussed for years. The so-called two hegemonies must have a war. Some people use the Cold War beginning to describe the situation in the United States and China as the U.S. and the USSR. And the Chinese Communist Party acts as the Soviet Communist Party. All these statements are not wrong, but they do not touch the essence. Without touching the essence of the matter, it will lead to miscalculation, misjudgment, and in most cases, the result will be disaster. This article attempts to put forward a perspective of the nature of the U.S.-Chinese situation, and in this perspective for the next 6 months of the Sandbox deduction. This is a hypothetical scenario, not an assertion, but if it can provide Taiwan a reference to how to get along between the collided from the United States and China, it has achieved the purpose of writing this article. The view is, this collision of United States and China, although there are all the foregoing factors, but in essence, it is essentially a pan-Christian faith tradition. It has seen through the authority tactics, ingenuity, ambition, yin and yang dialectic and duality under the unilaterally defined Chinese culture from the CCP. At the same time, it has also seen through the Chinese people's natural obedience character. The concrete evidence that the two complement each other is that 1.4 billion of people are symbiotically associated with a totalitarian system without contradiction. This evidence reveals to the United States that the femininity of the CCP is more terrible than the masculinity of the Soviet Communist Party. In the war-announced style speech as of Vice President Pence on October 4th, there was everywhere a revelation of the nature of the CCP and a warning of goodwill to the Chinese people. So in my recent articles and interviews, I set Pence's speech as anti-communist to save China, and put forward the suggestion of no straying the queue, and no jumping the queue for Taiwan's countermeasures. Based on this essence, let's do some Sandbox deduction. Please remember, this is just a deduction, not an assertion. The Sandbox premise is that the United States is determined and ready to ask the CCP to end its one-party dictatorship at whatever cost. And its determination and strength will be no less than that of demanding North Korea to denuclearize it. If the CCP agreed, a huge if. The United States will support China to rebuild, however, if the CCP to reject and then fight back. The U.S. will fight back with double. To the Chinese people, the United States is willing to lead Western countries to help China as long as they are awakened from thus centralization. Sandbox content is, the Manhan Banquet 108 dishes, one-by-one delivery, a variety of tariff sanctions. Scientific and technological sanctions are only small dishes. The main dish is to remove all obstacles in the South China Sea, in the Taiwan Strait, and in the East China Sea waterway. If necessary, forcibly dismantle offensive military facilities on the waterway. Once there is a military conflict, the special dish will be next, the currency war and the financial war. This feast Sandbox, the part of the pre-dish, has already occurred. All walks of life has been very thorough analysis, here it does not repeat. Let's talk about the main dishes first. It is impossible for the United States to unilaterally remove offensive military installations. But it will invite allies to participate as witnesses, including Japan, Britain, and even India and Australia. The process will not be completely smooth, and the removal results will not be done at once, but it must be substantial. If there were only minor military skirmishes in which both sides could step down, and both sides agreed to go down the steps first, the feast may stop serving for a while. But the above-mentioned ultimate goals of the United States would not change. If the military conflict escalates, the main dish might look something like that, but the order could be changed at any time, declaring China a currency manipulator. Publishing a sanctions list for CCP companies, starting a global chain of sanctions. As in this case against Iran, prosecuting China's senior officials for corruption based on the domestic law of the United States, freezing their assets in the U.S., and deal with the PRC, who inherited the ROC regime. As the PRC offered to repay the huge U.S. debt of the ROC, about 700 billion to more than 1 trillion, and suspended its international circulation with the U.S. government bonds in the hands of the PRC, about 1.2 trillion at present. Because the U.S. Treasury bonds are not entity, only the CUSUP transaction numbers, so in practice it is completely feasible. Anytime the sandbox is deduced, the black swans will appear. For example, the West's hidden centennial forces may be a dish via the non-governmental way. Or for example, the Chinese Communist Party is speeding up its petrocurrency relations with Iran and Saudi Arabia in an attempt to subvert the US dollar, and leading to the early implementation of the US currency war. So, are there any damping dampers in the sandbox? It may also be possible, for example, to speed up the struggle within the CCP, and then reach a consensus on changing the regime and reconciliation with the United States. In the sandbox deduction, how can Taiwan prevent the mud flow and landslides for protecting themselves? How to improve itself? How to achieve the consensus for the future? Maybe that is the most important question for you and me.